Hi, welcome along everyone. I'm Dr. Holly Tootle. I'm one of the academic staff here at the STEM Education Resource Centre, and I'm joined by Lucy Bennett, who's also one of our researchers and teachers here in the STEM area. Before we start, I just want to give acknowledgement of country. And I'm here on University of Canberra country here, and I acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, the traditional custodians of the land where Bruce campus is situated. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and contribution they make to the life of Canberra and the region. And we also acknowledge all other First Nations peoples on whose land we gather today. Well, welcome along to today, and thanks for taking the time out of your Friday to have a little bit of a quick learning experience in STEM education. Ross, if you want to throw up the Prezi slides for us. So today we're looking at STEM and future-ready children, and what does that mean? If we hop into the first circle there of STEM and preschool research, STEM, if you've been following us along by now, we all know that STEM is science, technology, engineering, and maths. And what we do know is that by providing a solid bedding for this in the early years of education, we are building up this lifelong love of inquiry and curiosity that builds the basis for future skill development. In this half hour, we want to value add to what you're already doing by looking at some easy to put together STEM ideas for inquiry and to just understand a bit more about the context of what research is happening in this field. If we can pop into the STEM pipeline now, Ross. So we know through research and through watchings what is happening, girls, rural and remote children, children from Indigenous backgrounds, and those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are the least likely to pursue STEM careers. We know that some of the buzzwords that we're using around this are future readiness and 21st century skills. And if we don't capture that imagination and curiosity in the early years, we know that these children aren't fulfilling what they could do in a world of work that's changing and needing to build stronger skill sets in those STEM areas. Often this comes from a lack of exposure from parents and other adults in early life. So having educators who are engaged with STEM, and you're here on this call on a Friday, looking at new and exciting ways to embed STEM exploration into learning experiences is one of the best things we can do to build these future-proof skills. Lucy's now going to jump in with some great hands-on examples of what you can do in your centres.
Thank you, Holly, and thank you, Ross. We'll just go over to the next section. Thanks, everyone. So as Holly mentioned, we're talking about that true nature of STEM inquiry. And as we know it, it's really important for that to begin as early as we know our children commence in that space. Unfortunately, research that I've been reading of late has been talking a lot about contributions that are being made at a secondary level, but we know that that's a little too late. So we thought it was best to look at STEM and the early years learning framework in version 2. So we know that the core foundation of the revised framework looks at those concepts of belonging, being, and becoming. And I thought it was best to just narrow those down to specifically look at the ones that do connect to STEM education. So when we're looking at belonging, we're looking at including local and global communities and that concept of digital technology and how that's connecting us beyond our current communities. And then when we look at becoming, we're looking at our children's capabilities and participation aligned with those 21st century skills that Holly was talking about before. And we're wanting our children to be problem solvers and critical thinkers. And we know that they are dispositions that are inherent to STEM inquiry. Thank you, Ross. Just the next section, please. So again, I thought it was best to narrow it down and have a look at the specific outcomes within the early years learning framework that align with what we talk about when we talk about STEM inquiry. So if we look at outcome 4, it focuses on those key words of a growth mindset. And again, those dispositions, I always like connecting them to the 21st century skills, the C's I call them: curiosity, confidence, creativity, commitment, and we've got the others there. And then the outcome 5 aligns specifically to the digital technology space. This is one that teachers tend to worry a little bit about in terms of integrating it into their daily pedagogical approaches, but do not fear. That's why we're here. We're going to give you some examples of how you can do that. Thank you, Ross. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about the current resources that are available, knowing that our Australian government has invested a lot of time, effort and money into curating these resources to support educators in the classroom and parents as well. So I've created a little document. The link is uploaded on the Prezi down the bottom, but I'll just very briefly talk about some of these resources. And the reason why I've selected some of these are because you don't need a paid subscription for the Let's Count. ELSA naturally you do, but the others have got a range of resources that you can access and that are free for educators. So ELSA, as you know, that's the space that we work in, developing apps. We've got the preschool apps that were launched, and now we're currently working on apps from foundation through to year 2. And they're looking at a range of play-based digital apps that support students aligned with the early years learning framework and the Australian curriculum as well, to build that capacity of early learning educators as well, and facilitating that STEM engagement for our students. The Let's Count Online, that's funded by the Smith family, and that looks specifically at an early learning mathematics program for children aged 3 to 5. Again, the beauty here is that it's aligned with the early years learning framework, and it supports children to develop those mathematical skills by noticing, exploring and inquiring in their world. So that really strong inquiry pedagogical approach. The Little Scientists is another program that's also funded to educators to help build their confidence and skills when they're implementing STEM ideas and concepts. And these also align with an inquiry-based approach. As I said, I'm not going to specifically go in and talk about each of the examples. I've created that link for you there so that you can access that in your own time. Thank you, Ross. Okay, so let's look at STEM and inquiry-based learning. So in the classroom, what does this look like for our students? We know that it's a cyclical process, and I also like talking about that design thinking concept of it being an iterative design process where students are coming back and forth, looking at that drawing board, asking questions, exploring and inquiring in our world. We're wanting them to be problem solvers, critical thinkers. We're wanting them to interpret data, to explain and be able to communicate their findings. And in order to do that, we need to provide them with the experiences to do it. So just the next slide, please, Ross, the inquiry-based learning. I think I've got another one added to that. So in terms of how inquiry-based learning enhances the teaching and learning of STEM, I've just uploaded just a summary of the benefits. So we look at it being able to enhance our students' reasoning skills, the beauty of it encouraging student agency, voice and choice, and allowing students to tap into their interests as well, which aligns with that exploratory concept of investigating, designing and imagining. And also we want our students to understand that with failure comes success. We have many famous failures in the world, Michael Jordan, Walt Disney. I love following stories about them and what made them succeed. And it's important for our students to understand that they may fail many times in order to celebrate that success. And that is the true nature of inquiry. And the important component of encouraging reflection. We want our students to be able to share their thinking and learning and use that as a take-home exit slip to guide our teaching and planning in the classroom. So in terms of what you can do, some really simple activities in terms of possibly shifting your mindset or just changing some approaches that you currently use in the classroom. I've spent a lot of time exploring that inquiry approach and obviously teaching in an inquiry-based school throughout my career. I was able to enhance my knowledge and understanding of that. So the units that I predominantly teach here at the University of Canberra within the science and technology space, and I've taken some inquiry-based learning experiences that could start as early as preschool and head right up through to primary school. So I'll just take you through some of those. Again, as I mentioned previously, I won't talk about how each of them work because I've created a document for you there for you to access. So I thought taking the STEM acronym and then aligning inquiry-based activities that align with each component. So this one focuses on maths. In terms of the structure and formation, there's simple resources there, pipe cleaners, students learning how to count ordering numbers, and the power of those inquiry sentence starters. So I've got those up the top. One of the days where we'd have all of our students in the classroom or in the early childhood space completing the same worksheet, sticking up exactly the same units, pieces of work of students on the board. Whereas inquiry, as we said, it allows students to hone in on individual responses and tapping into their learning that they're immersed in with the inquiry experiences that we present to them. So very simple maths task there that aligns with learning to count using a visual. And I like calling these STEM on a shoestring budget. So it's resources that you could probably find in your pantry or in your cupboards at home somewhere, I'm sure in one of your art storerooms in your teaching space. Thanks, Ross. The next one, please. This is another one looking at science now. So we've just spoken about the maths. Again, all the I was about to say ingredients, but all the instructions are there. This is one that I've done with many students in that kindergarten space, looking at condensation, water cycles, and exploring what causes clouds and rain. And it's called a rain cloud in a jar experiment. Again, different types of inquiry questions there that students can be immersed in, what I think will happen, what they've observed and what they've learnt. And that's the power of that reflection component that we were talking about before with the nature of inquiry. Thank you, Ross. The next one, please. Not that I should have favorites, but this is probably my all-time favorite. If we're really wanting to hone in on that concept of inquiry and bringing a global contextual problem into the classroom, this is a magical one. I delivered this just 2 weeks ago to my first year pre-service teachers, and looking at my Story Park app last week, my daughter also did this in her preschool environment. When we deliver an inquiry-based approach, we talk about the importance of multimodal means of representation. So how can we expose our students to a range of text, picture books that are out there, show them a range of videos to really hone in on those provocations and to get them start thinking about issues on a global scale. So this one, as you and I both all know, that oil spills is a common global issue that occurs and it's still occurring. I've got a range of literature that I've uploaded there that you could commence delivering in the classroom just to tap in and tune in, as we talk about with Kath Murdoch's inquiry cycle. She mentions that notion of tuning in and engaging our students. Again, so this is basic materials and giving students a range of resources so that they can carry out fair tests and look at which materials would be the most absorbent to clean up an oil spill. So as I said, bringing a global issue into the classroom for students to be immersed in. Again, a different range of inquiry question starters there that you could use as prompts for reflection for those students. Thank you, Ross. And then we move on to our final technology one. So this is a really simple one. You may have heard of Wallace and Gromit and Gumby. When I was little, I used to watch Gumby all the time and wonder how on earth do they produce these? So stop motion videos, it's something as simple as having thick cardboard, inviting students to bring in their toys from home, downloading a free app, which is just one there I put on the screen, a stop motion studio one that's available on iPads. And here you've got some simple instructions on how students can create stop motion animation videos incorporating the use of technology and linking it back to that key outcome we were talking about in the early years learning framework in that digital technology space. So some short, sharp and shiny pedagogical approaches you could apply incorporating STEM inquiry into your classroom. Thank you, Ross. Oh, can't hear you, Holly.
3 years into online and I'm still muting myself. Sorry about that. Thanks for sharing those great ideas, Lucy.
Pleasure.
I just want to spend a few minutes talking about technology and digital play because it gets a bad rap out there. Some of the ideas of screen time tend to either get parents upset or can be quite contentious in how we get around them. So my background is in technology and I look at it within the early years context. So I just want to bring a few other arguments to the table for you to have a think about. Firstly, technology doesn't have to mean digital technology. A spoon is a technology, A leaf can be a piece of technology depending on what you're doing with it. So remember to keep your ideas of technology really broad. One of the big arguments that's out there is passive versus active screen time or engagement. And when the TV was invented, we thought that was going to be the downfall of every generation to come. Hasn't turned out that way 100%. But when we talk about active screen time, it means using a screen in place of some other stimulus. So it might be that you're sitting alongside and engaging in an activity on a screen with a child. That's active engagement and isn't talking about the worrying part of screen time, which is passive or sedentary behavior, where a child's just left in front of a screen for an inordinate amount of time. It's really important that young children have positive technology role models, so they learn to understand it's just one of the many big tool set that they can draw from when the time's appropriate. So by modeling that positive behavior as an educator and as a parent, children are set up for success in their future technology use. If we jump into digital communication now, I think this is my famous triangle slide. Remember that the technology isn't the point of any of these engagements. If we look at this, this is some research thing I did a little while ago now. At the heart of it, it talks about the connectedness between a parent, an educator, a child, and how the technology can be the medium of that. So for those of you using digital documentation for your reporting and looking at how children are learning, just remember it's only one tool, and you have to have good engagement of each of those parties to make sure that that fully engaged communication is effective. If we drop onto the next slide. Digital play is getting a lot of airtime at the moment, and there's some great research being done out of our unit here at CERC, but also through a few other programs where we're looking at how we're understanding children playing in a digital context, because it is different. We do represent things differently, and we're seeing children take different roles and do their play representations in different ways. So some of the links to have a look at when these get sent through to you are our ELSA program, which is based around spatial reasoning and mathematics. The Digital Child, led by Susie Edwards out of ACU in Melbourne, is looking at ways of representing that digital play and coming up and drawing links between what we know about childhood play and learning and what that looks like in the digital space. And the final one there is through Marilyn Fleer's work about the conceptual play world. And again, this interfacing we have between digital play and real play. What is real play? Is digital play real play? Starting to unpack those conversations and to look more holistically at how children are engaging in their entire environment, which of course will include educational play on digital devices. Ross, if we bring that up now, I think we've got some time for questions and to just have a think about these ideas of STEM. We've got a few minutes, I think, to take if there's any questions available. And we're also happy to answer any other questions you might have in this area.
Thanks so much, Holly and Lucy. Yes, so as it's a webinar set up, the easiest way to ask a question is just to pop it in the chat, and I can relay it if Holly and Lucy don't see it. So does anybody have any questions about this presentation? Anything they'd like to see in future presentations that they're currently dealing with? You can pop it in the chat. We'll wait a little bit to see if anyone's got any questions before moving on.
Just whilst I guess maybe we should just note, we mentioned that those links we've got will be accessible to all of you that have joined our webinar today. So please don't fret, we've got them there for you to access.
Good, thank you, Lucy. Good point, actually.
You're welcome.
Yes, we do often get asked about this. So following, we've done the 2 sessions now, so this particular topic will finish today, and early next week, probably Monday, Tuesday, there'll be an email sent around to everyone who actually registered on Zoom, whether they managed to make it along or not. They'll get an email with a link to a recording of this and a PDF of these Prezi slides, which will have active links you can click on. Let's just check. Maria said, I love the multimodal approach. I would appreciate any ideas on map making and reading with children.
That's a great topic.
Yeah,
Lucy, do you want to grab it?
Yeah, I can send through some ideas for you, just with some activities and that I've done in the classroom. So really happy to share. Ross, well, we've got our email there. So if you just connect with us, and then I can relay that to Ross to pass on to you.
Oh yeah, I'll just pop up the contact details there as well. Yeah, so we also, for those of you familiar with the ELSA preschool program, there is a whole picture book that we've made on map making and using STEM in that context that I can send a link to as well. Another question, active digital play. Sometimes, this is from Jan, sometimes the response from children is aggressive when asked, even with a 5-minute warning to stop their game. What is your response?
I don't think there's any one size fits all response for that, because it is a part of that whole play experience. But again, these are not necessarily things we can answer right off the, in a couple of minutes that we have. So what I think might be useful, because I see Rachel's put in a great resource there as well, is if you don't mind, we might construct some answers and put some ideas down for you and then share it with that whole document. Because trying to manage children's expectations of technology, especially if they're not used to having it in the home, can be they do get quite aggressive around ownership of those pieces of technology, which is all the more reason why positive role modeling around technology use is so important. But I'm happy to put some of that work together for you, Jan.
I can just see Kim's, thank you, Holly. Kim's just got a question. She'd love to present the recording as a reflective discussion in the staff meeting. I'm sure, is that a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, we welcome you to use these resources in whatever professional capacity or personal capacity you would like to. So that's fine, Kim.
I just saw a question from Lorraine there that would have a child with sensory processing needs. Again, that's a very big question, and without specific context, it's very hard to have that conversation. So Lorraine, if you'd like to reach out to us on that email address, that's something that, again, that we can put a thoughtful response together for you, understanding the situation a little bit better.
I can give I was going to say I can just give a little bit of extra context to Jan's question as well. When we visited some centres to do some research on how they were implementing ELSA, one centre had an interesting way of doing it because they didn't have many tablets. I think they had one in the centre. And they even had a little roster that the children managed, and a sand timer or a stopwatch. And the child came in and ticked their name, and when the sand timer ended, they knew it was time to go and get the next person. It doesn't necessarily solve all of those problems, but there are ways that I've seen that you can get kids to self-manage some of that as well.
Yeah. Rachel's put a great question there. Sorry, are there any guidelines on digital technology time for children's safety? And Maria's come back with Munch and Move. Absolutely, with screen time. With my experience in research in this area, common sense is the key driver. That there are some of the official limits are 0 screen time for 0 to 2s, and then very limited time frame for 3 to 5s. But again, we have to have this in the context of passive use and active use, and what are they actually doing with the technology. So again, it's something that I like to agitate in. It's a space that I like to get into the really full and complex discussions around, because I think we need to be careful that there may not be one size fits all response around that.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. I'm just supporting what you've said there as well. The Early Childhood Australia released a statement on young children and digital technology, so one of their conferences in 2018. So I've just uploaded that link there as well, which might be beneficial.
Sorry, there was just a question I might have skipped from Susan. I just want to double check, how do we support ELA in STEM approach? Just checking if you're referring to ELSA, Early Learning STEM Australia, or ELA, Early Learning Languages Australia, which is a different program to us. If you're still there, Susan. Oh, okay, sure. So yeah, our program looks at STEM in early learning, which in a preschool context. And yes, we do have centres that also do the ELA program. think I skipped the wrap-up slide, so I don't know if Holly, sorry, if you wanted to.
That's okay. So thanks for joining us today. We appreciate that you've taken the time out of your busy schedules, and we hope that we've showcased some STEM readiness ideas that can be used in your centres, and maybe created a new spark of a thought or two. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for your passion and commitment to our future STEM leaders. It's so great to see you so passionate out there, and thank you for the work that you do with our young children.
Thank you, Holly. I second that. Thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks Ross for helping us with the navigation of the slides.
No problem. Thanks everyone for your time
Thank you.
and coming along. It's greatly appreciated.
Absolutely.
Okay.